I want to go straight to Mohammad Hamid Hamdar, Chief Editor, Heart of Asia. He's at the moment on ground zero. You are at the airport. Hamid, what do you want to tell us? What are you seeing around you? Give us a sense.
Hello everyone. As you know, this is the first suicide attacks were in Kabul, Afghanistan after Taliban captured the cycle close to Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul this evening. The witness who people who are injured, most are children, and several people who are leaving the country and were traveling to US and other foreign countries. As you know, that most of the people who were there was leaving the country, and most of them were injured. More than 50 persons were injured,
Right.
and 3 American troops were.
And what's happening now at the moment? What are you seeing around you at the moment? At the moment, has the airport been completely evacuated, completely cleared of people? Are there people still there? Can you see what is happening there at the moment, Hamid?
Yeah, we saw in social media, and
Okay.
some people who calling to us and gave the report that all the people who were collected there were escaping from the.
Okay, we'll try and go back to you. Remember, we are doing this with great difficulty, trying to connect to Kabul. Hamid is there at the airport. He and his family were trying to actually also be part of those wanting to leave Kabul. We'll keep trying to come back to you. I want to go to Ajay Shukla, who's joining me, senior defense analyst, and also joining me at the moment is Rakesh Sood, a former ambassador. I'm also joined by Sanjay Meston, former defense attaché to Afghanistan. Ajay, you covered the previous Afghanistan war, I remember, the build-up to Taliban 1.0. Are you surprised when you heard the news of these twin blasts? The Taliban, interestingly, is distancing itself from it, saying this is the work of the ISIS.
Rajdeep, the Taliban, it must be remembered now, is not part of the insurgents. It is part of the establishment. It is seeking to form the establishment on its own. It has agreed on a deal with the United States for people and citizens to be evacuated. And there are many people who are against this deal. The Taliban is as subject to opposition from many groups within Afghanistan. Daesh has already taken responsibility for this. It remains to be seen whether more groups that are opposed to the Taliban will take responsibility or not. But suffice to say that just as the Afghan government in past years has been at the firing line, the subject of these attacks, including suicide attacks, now it's the Taliban that is the establishment. And there are groups expressing their displeasure probably at the deal that the Taliban has struck with the United States for evacuating US citizens, evacuating other citizens as well. So I am not surprised. In fact, as the Taliban itself would probably be expecting, there would be more such attacks in the future. It's a horrible thought, but that's how it is.
Meston, former defense attaché to Kabul, are you, given the way the airport, how vulnerable is the airport? Hundreds of people, as we saw, were outside the airport desperately trying to somehow or the other get into the airport when these blasts occurred. Given the fragile situation, do you believe that a suicide bomber of this kind perhaps was impossible to stop?
Rajdeep, I totally agree with you. You know, when I was there, Kabul airport and the road from the US embassy was one of the most secured roads. But unfortunately, things on ground, what stand today is, the inner perimeter is totally manned by the US troops. And the outside is, of course, full of Afghan civilians, and you know, you have so many Taliban loitering around them. So therefore, there were obviously no checks and balances. It was obvious that, you know, any suicide bomber would have been very easy to get in because of no checks. Who was checking? It's quite a confused state presently. But what is you know, credible is that the intelligence was there about 2-3 days back. It was very credible. It was imminent, and really beyond that, Taliban could have done something to prevent it or warn the civilians. But I think the whole issue is why it has been done.
Right.
So my views are, firstly, it was a deterrent to the civilians that they should stop coming. It was basically a fear kind psychosis being imposed on the Afghan civilians. If you come here, this is the kind of fate you will meet. Secondly, as it is, the US image has been dented very, very much. This incident again dents the US image as a superpower. And third is, of course, it suits Pakistan, whether it is ISK who has done it or whether it is Taliban who has done the attack. It is Pakistan master stroke. They are achieving their aim and doing this mayhem in this thing, and they have no regards even for children's lives. Mother, what kind of people they are?
Okay, let me, we will come to the Pakistan angle in a bit, and how Pakistan in a way is trying to use the fluid situation in Afghanistan to their advantage, because there can be contrasting views as to how much leverage Pakistan will have if the situation remains so fluid, with various militias now trying to jostle for control. Rakesh Sood, we are just getting information that the French have decided that they are recalling, Macron is recalling his ambassador. You're having a situation of a complete vacuum that exists. That deadline of 31st August is just 5 days away for the Americans to evacuate and withdraw. The possibility exists, and these blasts seem to suggest that you will have a complete vacuum and potential mayhem over the next few months. Who is in charge?
Well, there is nobody in charge. I think the only conclusion that I would draw from this at the moment is that we have an expiry date of 31st August for the entire Western presence, full stop. That is one definitive conclusion that I would draw from this. The second conclusion that I would draw from this is that we will not know who is in charge, because there is going to be jostling for power between the factions of the Taliban, between the international militant groups such as the Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State Khorasan, the ETIM, the IMU, the factions of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and so on. So we will see a jostling for power between them, and that's about it. So under the circumstances, the third conclusion I will draw is that therefore Afghanistan is going into a prolonged period of conflict.
So you're suggesting in a way that while we've been positioning this as a Taliban takeover, in a sense, as one American scholar put it the other day, this is not the end, this is the beginning in a way of what could be a prolonged period of conflict within Afghanistan. Shubhajit Roy from the Indian Express joins me. And Shubhajit, you were in Kabul for the last, over several days, in the last 10 days, and you were actually at the airport. I read your fine piece about how difficult it was to just get out of that airport and the difficulties that you had dealing with the Taliban at the airport. Are you surprised by what you've just heard this evening, these serial blasts outside Kabul airport? Was this something that was in the air? There's been much talk about the airport being particularly vulnerable, Shubhajit.
Yeah, the military side of the airport, which is controlled by the US military, was always susceptible to a terror attack, because the three gates that through which you can enter this particular airport, which is one of the gates through which I had entered that military side, that is the gate where this blast had taken place. And if I remember, that day, the crowd was just swelling by each hour as people waited to get inside that airport. So, and in the last week or so, I've only seen pictures and images of crowd being there outside that particular gate where this blast took place. So, obviously, this particular terror attack was designed and aimed at causing maximum damage amongst people desperate to leave Afghanistan.
Now, these people, Shubhajit, when you were there, they were presumably aware of the hazards that were posed. You're saying that they were so desperate to get away that they, despite the fear of a potential being in a area which could be very, very susceptible, their main aim was just get out at all costs. And what was the Taliban doing in that entire US, at the base where the US troops were? What was their presence like?
So Taliban fighters were controlling access outside the airport, where they, with their AK-47, they were standing guard, and they were trying to discourage the crowd and sort of encourage them to leave. They were actually firing, conducting aerial firing gunshots in the air throughout those hours that I was there. And they wanted people to leave that particular place and not crowd around the airport at all. So, in fact, sometimes it got so messy, they actually fired at people just to scare them to go and ask them to go back. So this kind of a volatile situation was always there, where they would be firing, people would be killed, and there were moments where the crowd was so huge that there were almost stampede-like situation almost every hour. So we saw, women, children packed with their bags, some with visas, some with passports, some with nothing, just with their bags. They had just landed up at the gate of the airport, desperate to leave Taliban-ruled Afghanistan.
What you're portraying is a frightening image of what is going on when the state simply has withered away in Afghanistan. Jonathan Wachtel is joining me, Global Affairs Analyst, joined me from New York, because the only reactions we've got at the moment, Jonathan, are from the Pentagon statements that are coming out telling us that there have been twin blasts. How does this change, if at all, in your view, America's entire plan to evacuate by the 31st?
Look, you're asking a question that I have my own opinion about, but I'm going to leave that out of the conversation right now. Be that as it may, obviously there needs to be an initial preparation to try to thwart any further attacks, such as we've seen this morning in Kabul. This would have been expected. I mean, to be honest, I kind of expected this to happen tomorrow, because Friday is typically a day in which that type of preparation happens within terrorist planning, something that sadly India is familiar with as well. But it happened today. It happened early. There should have been, some planning that this would happen. This is the way of the Taliban. This is what they do. This is the way of Al Qaeda. This is the way of ISIS. These types of things are to be expected. And gloating as you have a retreat happening, as we're seeing now with the United States, terrorists love to gloat. They love to stick it in, make it even more painful, put us in a position in which we're caught with our feet unstable, and try to make this excruciating and make a point. And by the way, let's be honest about what this bodes. This is a telltale sign of what's to come. Withdrawing from Afghanistan is opening ourselves and other Western thinking governments around the world to the prospect of jihadi groups feeling that they can get away with impunity. So to answer your question is, we have to crack down on this as best as we can. And if we pull stakes and run, unfortunately, that is going to open us up to even further attacks. There's just no way around this.
But what happens in the immediate, within the next month? Do you see anything changing in terms of America? How does America respond immediately to two suicide bomb attacks taking place at an airport where there is a large US troop presence, where America is trying to push for evacuation in the next 4 days? Where does that leave the entire effort in your view? Does it change any timelines at all?
A personal viewpoint is the timeline needs to be what the timeline needs to be, and putting artificial restraints on that time is kind of foolish. We're dealing with a terrorist entity, and we've seen it displayed this morning, and we'll see more of it, and you really have to adjust. That's what contingency plans are. So really my hope is that we are taking the right military posture to try to rectify the given situation. The casualties, I pray for the families and the people who have been injured in this needless blast, as people were trying to help people to escape what essentially is a terrible situation. And we really need to have a very firm and strong posture to get through. If we're going to try to meet this deadline that has been imposed, then we have to fortify ourselves and get there and be prepared to have a firefight and to try to have as much maximum security to get there as we can. But my sincere hope is that we accommodate the new reality. The new reality is the threat is there. All this talk of a reformed Taliban, a reformed situation in Afghanistan, and that they don't want to have any animus towards the West, it's proven completely false. So today just says all we need to see. So we have to react responsibly and deal with the situation soberly and with strength.
One of the new elements, Ajay Shukla, that's come into this dynamics is the Islamic State, which is claiming responsibility. The Khorasan group, presumably, the Taliban is blaming them. They haven't claimed responsibility as yet, but there is the fear that you have now new militias coming, new jihadi groups out there, each of whom is going to try in a way to assert their authority in Afghanistan and beyond. Do you see that adding, in a sense, a new piece to this already troubled, bloodied Afghanistan situation?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We've become over the years so used to blaming everything that goes wrong in Afghanistan or attacks that take place on the Taliban that we're now finding it hard to come to the sort of understanding and conclusion that it is the Taliban that is at the receiving end, being the formation of the government. The Taliban and the United States are now the targets of these attacks that are taking place and that are likely to increase. Now, this certainly takes Afghanistan one step back into the past when multiple factions were jostling for power, attacking each other. And here you can immediately think of at least 3 or 4 different groups that would be at this point in time thinking of attacking the Taliban. Apart from the Daesh, which has already taken responsibility for the blast, there are elements of the Haqqani faction, the Haqqani network. There's the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. There is the Panjshiri groups that are strongly opposed to the Taliban. So there are multiple angles now to this horrible power game that is going on. And the Americans, quite rightly, are just interested in getting out of there, catching their planes and going home by the 31st. But this jostling for power is going to continue, and there is going to be more elements and more incidents of this kind in the future.
So then let's look at where India stands. Rakesh Sood, because today we had External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar brief political parties say that India is going ahead with its evacuation, that India is very much part of whatever happens in Afghanistan, the great game being played. India is involved in it. What's your sense, given this fluid situation, this jostling for power, can India simply just wait and watch till the situation reaches some kind of stability, which seems at the moment a very distant possibility, that we will have any kind of immediate stability? What does India do?
Well, I think that, you can develop a strategy when you have more than one option. And because then you can evaluate pros and cons of each option, and you can judge and evaluate and then therefore develop a strategy. I'm afraid right now we don't have any option other than to wait and watch. All other options are kind of blocked for the simple reason that we are not in touch with the Taliban. We are not in touch with any of the other groups that are calling the shots. We had placed our eggs in the basket of the Ashraf Ghani government, which is no longer existent, or the US presence, which is also on its way out. And so, in a sense, we are left without an option. So, I think the only choice before us is to wait and watch. And frankly, I think that, while there may be differences on turf between the different groups, whether it is the Islamic State Khorasan or the Taliban or the others, in terms of ideology, there is no difference.
No, but the
more
question,
than one.
I take your point, but the question at the moment on the ground, and Shubhajit, since you've been there, is how do you get every Indian citizen back safely? Already this morning we are told that Afghan Sikhs who were trying to get away were pushed back and have gone back to the Gurdwara. So there have been these occasions. Is that a fear that getting now the remaining Indians out is not proving as easy as it was, let's say, even a couple of days ago?
Absolutely. I think India has so far been able to evacuate some more than 500, Indian nationals as well as some Afghan nationals. But now after these blasts, this terror attack, I think it will be incredibly difficult for the Indian government to evacuate the remaining Afghan Sikhs who, as you rightly pointed out, that they have been pushed back and they can't reach the airport. And mind you, in the last couple of days, things were becoming difficult because the Taliban fighters were themselves discouraging people from getting to the airport. Right. So it's all in all, it looks chances of Indians getting out of Afghanistan anymore or Afghans getting out of Afghanistan is becoming bleak now after this particular attack.
You know, that's very worrying. Jonathan, I'm coming to you in a moment, but I want you to see this, what's happened. We've got Naveed, who's one of our people on the ground, who's trying to give you a sense of what's happening. He's done a drive-through. Please appreciate these are very difficult conditions there, but Afghan journalists are very bravely trying to report what they're seeing at the moment in Kabul. Just watch this, Jonathan, coming to you in a moment.
I'm going to now to hospital on the way. You see in the photo, in a video, the people are killed in this explosion to the airport area. Now I'm on the way, go to the emergency hospital, to the Kabul emergency hospital. You are waiting for the new report from India today. And also you see the people, they're civilian people, they want to travel to other countries. They're lining up outside the airport and they are killed by one explosion and outside of the airport.
You can see those people just desperate to get out. You know, Jonathan Walker, we are looking at what India's options are, and as Rakesh Sood points out, wait and watch. What are the world's options at the moment? You're saying the world cannot allow this to continue in this manner. The Islamic State, the Taliban, the various factions will, be uncontrolled, and they will target establishments not just within Afghanistan but across the world. What are the world's options?
You know, unfortunately, I couldn't see the images of your reporter because I'm just not getting that signal here. But I've been in these situations. I've seen them firsthand. I was a journalist, and I actually was in Afghanistan in 2001 and 2002. So, familiar with the scenes. It's heartbreaking, and unfortunately, it's the chaos that ensues in these circumstances. And eventually, as we know with life, and we know post terrorist attacks and things like that, there are lives that are directly affected, indirectly affected. It's a horrible human stain and tragedy, but then we move on. Here's what we have right now. We have a situation in which our hand is caught, and this is also the attempts to get Indian nationals out of the country. Our respective hands are stuck in a can that has been opened up, a tin can with sharp edges right now. And either we yank our hand out and free ourselves of this, or we go back in and try to cut around the can and liberate our situation in a very strategic military way that then settles the situation. It really comes down to that kind of graphic, horrible situation that we're caught in. And there's no happy ending to this. Lives are going to be lost. People are going to be hurt. Additional tragedies are going to befall innocent people. And that's the situation we're in right now. The only hope that we have is coordinated attempts, because right now I'm listening to these sad stories of difficulties that Indian nationals are having. Every country that has nationals in that unfortunate situation is suffering. There needs to be tighter coordination of efforts. In numbers, we're stronger. In efforts, we'll be more effective. And that's the type of conversation we need to have. And we have to figure out whether there needs to be some sort of military insertion to try to eliminate the bloodshed, to eliminate some of the pain, rather than yanking our respective hands out of this jagged-edged can that we have our hands in right now?
Well, at the moment, it appears the world has taken the latter option, and the vacuum is being exploited now by various jihadi groups who are jostling for power, as we keep saying. Major General, you know, when you were in Kabul at that time, Taliban 1.0, we saw that India, you know, in a way got a bit of the blowback. That's when terror attacks took place in this country. Jaish, Lashkar, all of them, links between Islamabad and Kabul, well known at the time. Do you fear a repeat again, that what we are seeing today in Kabul could happen anywhere else tomorrow?
Definitely, I do agree that what is happening in Kabul today will be manifesting in most parts of the world. But I would just like to add on something. You know, you raised a very pertinent issue of, evacuation of the balance of Indians. I think presently we have two contacts available. That is Abdullah and Hamid Karzai, who are good friends of India. And our people are in touch with them. And I think it is through their channels, they may insist on the Taliban that we should be getting a safe passage. So that is point one. Point two is about what should the world do. I would, since there is a US guest over here, I would state that the purpose of the Doha agreement was to have a peace and stability. But that has totally failed. You know, there were four critical points. One was a ceasefire between the US and the Taliban, and also for the Afghan National Army, that ceasefire failed. The Afghan National Army was overrun. Thereafter, it was, the troop reduction. The Americans have been doing troop reduction in every manner, and now they are following the deadlines of the Taliban. I'm quite surprised. Next is the intra-Afghan negotiation, which should have commenced then, presently seem to have failed. And let me tell you, this state of instability will continue. And last is, they were looking for counter-terrorism assurance that Taliban will not allow any other party oblique, ISIS or Al-Qaeda to flourish. How this has happened today? So they have, gone back on all their promises. And I think the options today for the US is, and maybe as a army man I speak, because, they have sacrificed their blood. The war veterans of the United States and his allies, the serving officer, I'm quite sure they would be pressurizing their government that they need to do something. And yes, they can do something. He did hint at some kind of insertion.
The worry is that we still don't know what. The worry is that while the world says we need to do something, as I said,
they can support the resistance movement, which is being led at Panjshir Valley
by Ahmad Masood. I'll come to that in a moment. But interestingly, as I said, the French have also decided to withdraw their ambassador. Ajay Shukla, there are contrarian views from former, within the Indian strategic affairs community, within those who have been IFS officers, that should we have got out of Afghanistan as early as we did? Did we do the right thing? Who now becomes our interlocutor in Kabul? What's your view?
Well, Rajdeep, the original sin is not leaving or not leaving the embassy at this point. The original sin on the Indian side was not developing a dialogue track with the Taliban in the first place. As early as 2010, 2011, it was evident that the Taliban is on the ascendant. They are going to rise again. They're going to form first a major group in Afghanistan and then eventually take over power itself. It could be seen by far-sighted observers right from those days itself. But we still never got down to opening a dialogue track with the Taliban. The Taliban was keen on a dialogue with India because they want to build a hedge against Pakistani or sort of pressure on them. But we never did it. And now these decisions about whether to evacuate the embassy, whether to leave a skeleton staff or not, are being taken without the key player who is ascendant in power in Kabul, which is the Taliban. So I think by now we should have already sort of contacted the Taliban. I hope it's happening as we speak, so that we have some kind of inputs about plans and what's going to happen in the future on which we can base these big decisions that have to be taken.
At today's all-party meeting, I don't think there was a clear answer from the External Affairs Minister on that. Whether we are going to start a dialogue with the Taliban. Rakesh, so this is a contentious issue. Given what we are seeing happening at the moment on the ground, this unstable situation, the violence that's taking place, can you really, in your view, you're saying wait and watch. But while we wait and watch, should we be opening some kind of a channel at least to ensure all Indian citizens in the first instance are evacuated safely, and the Taliban give us guarantees, assurances on that?
Well, first, Rajdeep, let me just tell you, it is not just a question of the Indian citizens towards which we have a legal responsibility. I would like to point out on this show that we also have a very strong moral responsibility towards the Afghans who have helped us during the last 20 years to establish the kind of presence that we have built up in Afghanistan. And I'm afraid that we have not seen any progress on that count. Yes, we have seen some Afghan Hindus and Sikhs coming back on these flights, but we've not seen much progress on the other count.
You know,
then, secondly, to come back to this, while I agree wholeheartedly with Ajay in terms of the fact that we did not see the writing on the wall, which was very clear that the Taliban were on the ascendant. The first sign happened when the Taliban opened their international office in Doha. That was the first step towards legitimization. The second step happened when the breakthrough happened when the US opened direct negotiations with the Taliban in 2018. And then finally, the shape of the agreement. Now, I disagree with my Major General colleague that the Taliban had made any commitments. If we look at that agreement, the Taliban had made 0 commitments. The only time-bound commitment that had been made was the US withdrawal. All other commitments were notional. They were not time-bound. They were not verifiable.
Okay.
So the whole idea of an intra-Afghan dialogue or a ceasefire or a reduction in violence or a breaking off of ties is not a verifiable, definitive commitment. So in a sense, it is easy to say that the Taliban have reneged on their commitments, but they have not. That is the reality.
Okay.
We have deluded ourselves into believing that the Taliban made those commitments. And that is why we are in the kind of situation in which we are today.
You know, Shubhajit Roy, having been on the ground as you were in the last few days, what was the sense you got about how are people perceiving India there? There's always, you know, the Taliban leadership and the present Taliban leadership, its links with Pakistan, well known. But how was India perceived? As has been suggested, India has invested a lot in the Afghan people. Did you get that sense that Indians in particular are relatively safer, that Afghans value that relationship with New Delhi and India?
Yeah, amongst ordinary Afghans, among common Afghans, I think there is a clear sense that India has a benign presence. Indians are welcome, and you know they want to. They are looking towards India for help. Whether they want to escape Afghanistan, many of them I'm in touch with after I got back safely to India. Many of them that I'm in touch with, they all want to apply for the e-visas. They all want to. Many of them want to come to India. In fact, many of them have spent a lot of time in India. You know, either they've studied here or done business here or had come for medical treatment here. So there is a huge presence and very positive image of India.
Right.
But having said that, the Indian government right now, I think, has not been able to help the friends of India as effectively as they should have. Just as the Americans or the Europeans or the Western community has helped and evacuated friends of those countries, India has not been able to do that so far. I think that is a very, very negative signal that will go out if India does not live up to its commitment and is not able to evacuate or give shelter or even a transit passage towards wherever they want to go to wherever. And India's cancellation of all visas on the passports, on Afghan passports, actually also, you know, raises the difficulty level for an ordinary Afghan who wants to come to India once the situation normalizes and commercial operations, flights start.
You know, we've just of course had this incident which your newspaper reported about a Afghan lawmaker who was actually deported when she was trying to come into India and not allowed to enter. That is that is an unfortunate incident. Interestingly, also, as you said in your story, the person who helped you get out of Kabul, or one of those who helped, had a WhatsApp with Shah Rukh Khan's image, which shows that there are those ties that exist. But, you know, Jonathan, in conclusion, as we go back to what's happened today, are you getting, as you said, are we heading now for a situation where Afghanistan will now be the most dangerous place on earth in the next few years? That is how we're, you know, till over the next couple of years, that's what we are looking at. There'll be many more blasts, many more lives are going to be lost, and the world is just going to watch.
I want to hope, I can't remember, and I couldn't see the gentleman who spoke earlier, but he gave a wonderful insight that perhaps there's a hope that Karzai and Abdullah might be able to help India out with trying to get their expatriates out of the country. Look, that might be the only way through this, but frankly speaking, Karzai and Abdullah were protected for years by U.S. Special Forces. So let's be realistic about how limited their scope might be. In terms of what you're painting in terms of a country, a failed state, yes, Afghanistan has already now joined the ranks of Yemen and Lebanon and other parts of the world that are in the hands of essentially groups that have no compunction with killing innocents to achieve their gains. You know, I keep on thinking of the fable of the frog and the scorpion, and the scorpion meeting the frog on the bank and asking the frog to take him across the stream, and midway across the stream the scorpion stings the frog, and they're both dying, and the frog asks why, and the scorpion says, because I'm a scorpion, it's in my nature. The Taliban is the Taliban. It is in their nature, even given what's happening now, where their fellow citizens are being helped, where there's been attempts over the last couple of decades to try to stabilize the country and bring it up into the modern world. We're not dealing with normal people as you and I and the rest of this panel know, and the viewers watching this. We are dealing with an Islamist fundamentalist group that is going to allow, whether they want it or not, other groups in there like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and we're back into a horror show of what we've seen from Libya to Yemen and in parts of Africa, and now Afghanistan. Welcome to this cruel reality of pre-9/11. And the only hope, really the only hope, is to try to contain this. Thankfully, there is that enclave that another gentleman on this panel mentioned in the Panjshir Valley with General Massoud, with Massoud's, the commander's son. Hope that there might be some sort of vestige and something to work with to try to restore some sort of thing. It's a long road now. And unfortunately, we've lost our position of strength to be able to carry it on, and we can only hope that this spiral of violence doesn't hurt us all in ways that are even worse than we saw before.
A world that could be heading to a pre-9/11 catastrophic situation in Afghanistan and its impact on the world. What we've seen today with these twin blasts perhaps is a primer to what lies ahead. A violent and unstable Afghanistan is the last thing the world needs. Thank you all very much for joining us with your insights this evening. I really appreciate that, because remember, this story broke late and many of our guests have only come in at the very last moment to tell us what they see is likely to happen. So thanks very much to all of you for joining me. Kerala is at the center of India's COVID battle yet again. The state's COVID numbers continue to surge in the week following Onam festivities. The administration coming under pressure for the failure to bring down the numbers. Our correspondent Gopi Unithan now brings you this report from Kerala.
Onam is to Kerala what Diwali is to Delhi. The state which gave the festival the go-by last year, this time opened up and celebrated big time. A week later, the aftermath is there to see. The state reported over 30,000 cases on Thursday, with the test positivity ratio above 18%. Kerala is the only state in the country with over 1 lakh active COVID cases. It contributed over 60% of the cases in the country on Thursday. The Union Health Ministry says the state must increase testing and tracing to get a grip on the situation.
टेस्ट जो हो रहे हैं केरल में उनकी संख्या को और बढ़ाने की आवश्यकता है और इन टेस्ट्स में जो लोग पॉजिटिव पाए जाते हैं उनके कॉन्टैक्ट ट्रेसिंग को और प्रभावी बनाने की आवश्यकता है. बेटर एंड इफेक्टिव मॉनिटरिंग ऑफ पीपल who are in home isolation. Why? Because more than 80% of people are in home isolation in the state. So therefore, festivals have to be celebrated with COVID appropriate behavior.
The saving grace experts in Kerala say is that hospitals are taking the load. But now the stress is starting to show. 38% of the ICU beds are vacant and 37% of the ventilators are available.
Increase the total number of vaccination in the coming days, and if the hospital admissions are under control, this surge also can be managed easily.
Kerala Health Minister Veena George has blamed the higher numbers on improper isolation of patients at home.
See, we are closely monitoring the situation, and our government of Kerala is dedicated to protect the lives and also the livelihood. When you look at the fatality rate, we have one of the lowest fatality rates in the country, around 0.5%.
The surge in Kerala has sparked a political row, with both Congress and BJP targeting the left government.
An extremely unfortunate and negative development by a government that has been elected on a platform of being the people's government. That Kerala is in the ICU, and before it gets carried away in an ambulance, the government needs to take better action.
Government of Kerala said that we are introducing the home quarantine, which has miserably failed. So with such a good health infrastructure, if the government is not able to perform, it shows that the government doesn't have the capacity, government is ineffective.
Kerala is at a critical juncture in its fight against COVID-19 pandemic. The state is betting on its high vaccination coverage to avoid serious illnesses among those infected by the virus. But if the cases continues to rise, the state's health infrastructure could well be compromised. With camera person Vishnu, Gopikrishnan Unnithan in Thiruvananthapuram for India Today.
Let's turn from there to our good news story. And the story comes about 19-year-old Maitri Patel from Surat, who created history by becoming India's youngest commercial pilot. Despite financial constraints, the young prodigy was able to accomplish her dream in a record 11 months. Here is her story.
19-year-old Maitri Patel has just become the youngest commercial pilot in the country. After completing her 18-month pilot's training in record-breaking 11 months, Maitri is now aiming to fly wide-bodied commercial airliners.
मैं 8 साल की थी जब मैंने पहली बार पायलट और एक प्लेन देखा था. जब से ही मेरा सपना रहा है कि मैं पायलट बनूं. फिर 12वीं साइंस मैंने ख़त्म करी और फिर मैं अमेरिका गई. वहाँ 11 महीने की ट्रेनिंग ख़त्म करी और कमर्शियल पायलट बन के आई.
Maitri has always dreamt of being a pilot. In fact, from the age of 8, she had set her sights on taking to the skies. For her parents, realizing Maitri's ambitions were always a challenge, given their financial resources. Finally, her father sold his ancestral land to pay the steep fee for her training in an American flight school.
छोटी उम्र में उसने गोल नक्की कर लिया था कि मैं पायलट बनूंगी. हर शनि रवि हम ग्राउंड थियरी के लिए बॉम्बे लेके जाते थे. फिर उसको मैंने अमेरिका भेजा ट्रेनिंग के लिए और वहाँ उसने 12 महीने का कोर्स वो 11 महीने में अचीव कर लिया. उसने बहुत मेहनत किया. वो मेहनत का फल भगवान ने उसको दिया है.
हम लोग इतना खुश है कि इतनी 19 साल की उम्र में ही उसने अपना ड्रीम साकार किया है, तो वो बहुत अच्छा लगता है.
Maitri has justified the sacrifices made by her family. After she gets an Indian flight license, she will don the wings of pilot and enter the cockpit. And then, as they say, the sky is the limit. Bureau Report, India Today.
Nice good news story on what has been an unfortunate evening. Those twin serial blasts at Kabul airport that have spread panic. Our image of the day, Pakistan Muslim League Vice President Maryam Nawaz's son, Junaid Sabdar's wedding, becoming an internet sensation after he sang the Mohammad Rafi song at his wedding. I can tell you Nawaz Sharif's favorite singer was Mohammad Rafi. This is our image of the day. Listen to the song. Good night. Goodbye.